The South Atlantic wind cut like a blade across leading seaman David Trotter's face as he raised his binoculars to scan the horizon. It was 1:07 p.m. local time, and the sea stretched endlessly in every direction, a churning gray-blue wilderness 8,000 miles from home. HMS Coventry, all 4,820 tons of her, rode the moderate swells with the practiced ease of a purpose-built warship. Somewhere out there, beyond the white-capped waves, Argentine pilots were climbing into their cockpits. Trotter could feel it in his bones. Beautiful day to die, innit? Able seaman James Fenton appeared beside him, camera hanging around his neck like always. The kid was 21, fresh-faced despite 3 weeks of war. He still thought documenting everything mattered. Shut it, Fenton. But Trotter smiled despite himself. Gallows humor kept you sane out here. That and the knowledge that your mates had your back. He fingered the St. Christopher medal beneath his shirt, his grandmother's parting gift when he'd shipped out from Plymouth. "Keep you safe on the water," she'd said. The old woman had strange ideas about the sea, always muttering about things that lived in the deep places, things that predated man's dominion over the waves. The ship's intercom crackled to life. Petty Officer Michael Henderson's Liverpudlian accent, usually dripping with humor, now carried an edge sharp as broken glass. "Bridge, ops room, multiple fast movers inbound, bearing 270, estimate 4 aircraft, speed 500 knots. Time compressed." The klaxon's two-tone wail split the air. Trotter's training kicked in before his conscious mind processed the threat. Throughout HMS Coventry, 253 men sprinted to their combat positions. The sound of hatches slamming shut reverberated through the hull, watertight doors spinning closed, sealing the ship into compartments. If she took damage, the flooding could be contained. If she took damage. Captain David Hartdyke's voice came across the intercom, measured and calm, the voice of a man who'd prepared his entire career for this moment. "Action stations, weapon system to auto, all hands, this is not a drill." Trotter pressed the binoculars to his eyes, scanning westward. The sun caught the wave crests, turning them into thousands of diamond points. Beautiful, deadly. And there, 2 specks, darker than the foam, impossibly low. His heart hammered against his ribs. Visual contact. 2 aircraft, wave-top height, closing fast. Through the binoculars, the specks resolved into shapes of 4 Skyhawks. Argentine Air Force. He could see their camouflage paint scheme now, could see the way their jet exhaust created small wakes on the ocean surface. They were flying at 50 feet, maybe less, low enough that they were practically kissing the waves, low enough that radar struggled to distinguish them from sea clutter, low enough that they had to be insane or desperate or both. Distance, 8 miles. Closing speed, combined 1,000 miles per hour. Time to engagement, less than 30 seconds. The Sea Dart missile launcher whirred as it traversed, tracking the incoming threat. Inside the operations room, the nerve center of the ship, Lieutenant Commander Colin Seymour watched his displays with the focused intensity of a man who knew that seconds mattered. The Sea Dart system was good, one of the best in the world, but it had limitations, altitude limitations. These Argentine pilots knew that. They'd learned the hard way, watching their friends die, which approaches worked and which ones got you killed. Sea Dart having difficulty maintaining lock, targets below optimal parameters. Henderson's voice had lost its jovial edge entirely now. Seymour's response came without hesitation. "Fire anyway!" Fire 2 missiles. The ship shuddered. Trotter felt it through his boots, through his bones. 2 Sea Dart missiles roared from their launcher in great gouts of white-hot exhaust. Their smoke trails arced across the sky, seeking, hunting. The missiles climbed, their semi-active radar homing, struggling with the sea clutter, with the sheer closeness of the targets to the ocean surface. Through his binoculars, Trotter watched the Argentine pilots react. They saw the launches, had to. You couldn't miss the smoke trails, and both Skyhawks jinked hard, deploying chaff, the radar confusing strips glittering in the sunlight like aluminum confetti. Both missiles passed overhead, missing by hundreds of feet. They detonated 2 miles beyond the targets. Orange fireballs against blue sky. Harmless, ineffective. "Missiles away, no impact!" someone shouted unnecessarily. Everyone could see. HMS Broadsword, positioned 2 miles away in their Type 42/Type 22 defensive pairing, opened fire with her Seawolf missiles and 40mm guns. Tracer fire arced across the water, brilliant even in daylight. But the Skyhawks didn't deviate. They were committed now, professional, determined, brave beyond any rational measure. Captain Hartdyke's next order came sharp and immediate. "Hard to port, maximum turn." The destroyer heeled dramatically as she threw herself into the turn. Trotter grabbed for a handhold, his coffee mug, forgotten until this moment, sliding across the deck and shattering, papers scattered from someone's hands. The ship's frame groaned with the stress of high-speed maneuvering, of tons of steel and machinery and human flesh being forced through angles that defied comfortable physics. Trotter kept his binoculars up, kept watching, couldn't look away. The lead Skyhawk grew from a speck to a dot, to an actual aircraft in seconds that felt like hours. He could see the pilot now, helmet, oxygen mask, the man's shoulders hunched forward in concentration. The Skyhawk's bomb bay was visible, 2 dark shapes beneath the fuselage. The 20mm Oerlikon cannons opened up, their rapid hammering vibrating through the ship's structure, through Trotter's chest, through his teeth. Tracers streamed toward the incoming aircraft. The lead pilot pulled up. Now Trotter was looking at the Skyhawk's belly, at the bombs, and 2 objects detached, tumbling through the air with lazy grace that belied their lethal purpose. Time stopped. The first 1,000-pound bomb struck HMS Coventry on the port side, forward of the bridge, at the waterline. It penetrated the hull, punched through steel like paper, traveled through several compartments, and then the fuse armed. The explosion was catastrophic. A massive orange fireball erupted from the port side, blowing outward and upward. The blast wave hit Trotter like a physical punch from an invisible giant. He flew backward, struck the bulkhead hard enough to see stars. His ears rang, a high-pitched whine drowning out all other sound. Smoke, black, oily, choking, billowed from the wound in the ship. Secondary explosions followed, the distinctive crump, crump, crump of ammunition cooking off. Men were screaming. Trotter couldn't hear them over the ringing in his ears, but he could see their mouths open, see the terror and pain written across their faces. The damage control alarms added their shrieking to the chaos. He tried to stand. His legs didn't want to obey. The deck was tilting, listing to port already. That couldn't be right. That couldn't be happening this fast. The second Skyhawk, following 3 seconds behind its leader, also pulled up and released. The second bomb struck higher, hitting the operations room directly. Inside that space, Lieutenant Commander Seymour was at his station, processing damage reports from the first hit when the bomb penetrated the overhead. He had perhaps 1/10 of a second to register the dark shape crashing through the ceiling before the explosion vaporized everything. Seymour, Henderson, 14 other men, gone. The ship's nerve center ceased to exist in a single white-hot instant. HMS Coventry was mortally wounded. The destroyer listed heavily to port, already down by the bow. Water rushed through massive breaches in the hull. Electrical systems failed. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in hellish red. The ship was dying, and everyone aboard knew it. Captain Hartdyke, blood streaming from a head wound that he wouldn't remember receiving, made the hardest decision a captain can make. Abandon ship. All hands, abandon ship. This is not a drill. Trotter picked himself up, vision blurred, tastings blood. His rational mind struggled to process what had happened. Minutes ago, had it been minutes? It felt like seconds. They'd been at action stations, ready, confident. Now the ship was dying beneath them. He stumbled toward the port side to help launch life rafts. The ship was listing 20 degrees now, still turning from the last evasive maneuver, the ocean rushing up to meet the deck. He had minutes, maybe less. Around him, men moved with practiced efficiency despite the chaos. This was what training was for, the ability to function when your world was literally exploding. Then he saw it. About 200 yards off the port beam, the water was disturbed, Not by the ship's wake, this was something else. A massive upwelling, circular, perhaps 30 yards across. The water was boiling, churning, white foam mixing with something darker underneath. What the bloody hell is that? Fenton appeared beside him, camera still somehow around his neck despite the explosions, despite everything. The upwelling moved. It tracked along the port side, keeping pace with the dying ship, moving against the current and wind. That wasn't possible. Water didn't behave that way. Not without something underneath, something big, something moving with purpose. Other crew members noticed. Able Seaman Williams pointed, shouted something lost in the wind and chaos and the groaning of dying metal. The water bulged upward. For just a moment, 3 seconds, maybe 4, something broke the surface. Trotter's brain refused to process what his eyes were seeing. Dark, ridged back. Scales or armored plates catching the sunlight. Mottled dark green and gray, almost black. The visible portion was at least 40 to 50 feet long. The texture was organic, alive, glistening wet. The movement was sinuous, serpentine, and then, God help him, an eye. An eye the size of a dinner plate, round, yellow with a vertical slit pupil like a cat or a reptile. An eye that tracked the ship with unmistakable intelligence. Like a crocodile's back, Fenton whispered beside him. But massive. Jesus Christ, it's massive. The shape submerged, the water calmed. 3 seconds of visible contact, burned into Trotter's memory forever. His rational mind tried desperately to explain it away. Whale, number, wrong shape, wrong movement. Whales didn't have vertical pupils. Submarine, no periscope, no conning tower. And why would a sub surface here, now, in the middle of this? No time to think. The ship lurched further. The list increased to 30 degrees. Men were abandoning ship now, jumping into the freezing South Atlantic. The water temperature was 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Without an exposure suit, survival time was 20 to 30 minutes maximum. Trotter helped 3 younger sailors into a life raft, practically throwing them over the tilting rail before jumping himself. The cold hit like 1,000 knives, simultaneously stabbing every nerve in his body. He gasped involuntarily, inhaling salt spray, choking. His muscles seized. He thrashed toward the nearest raft, hands already going numb. Other hands grabbed him, pulled him into the inflatable craft. HMS Coventry continued to roll. The death throes of a ship are terrible to witness. The groaning of metal stressed beyond endurance. Internal explosions as fires reached fuel and ammunition. The sea claiming what was never meant to sink. The destroyer rolled past 45 degrees, then 60. Her starboard side was now visible, the red anti-fouling paint exposed to air for the first time since her launch 4 years ago. Did you see it? Fenton had made it to the same raft, camera still around his neck, waterlogged but still there. Tell me you saw it. Trotter nodded, teeth chattering so hard he could barely speak. I saw it. The disturbance in the water reappeared, closer now, within 100 yards of the rafts. Multiple crew members saw it this time. At least 20 men scattered across 6 life rafts, all witnessing what happened next. The creature, because they all knew now it was a creature, not debris, not imagination, not anything they could rationalize away, surfaced more fully. This time, visibility was better. Duration longer. 8 to 10 seconds of sustained observation. The body was serpentine, elongated, but with mass. Not snake thin, thick, muscular, powerful. The length was impossible to fully gauge with only portions visible, but comparing it to the rafts, to the sinking ship, to known reference points, 60 to 80 feet. Conservative estimate. The head was partially visible now. Massive, reptilian features. The neck undulated with smooth, powerful movements. The color remained that mottled dark green-gray dorsally, lighter ventrally. The scales overlapped like armor plating, and those eyes, 2 of them, each the size of a basketball, yellow-green with vertical pupils, tracking the humans with unmistakable awareness. It swam in a circle around the rafts and sinking ship, keeping distance, 50 to 100 yards. The movements were smooth, powerful, deliberate. When it moved with purpose, The speed was frightening, estimated 15 to 20 knots, faster than most ships could manage. But it wasn't attacking, it was investigating. A sound accompanied its movement, low frequency, rumbling. Trotter felt it more than heard it, vibrating through the water, through the inflatable raft, through his chest cavity. Around 30 to 40 hertz, maybe less. It made his heart skip beats, made his breathing difficult. When the creature passed closer, within 70 yards, the smell reached them, musky, organic, like a reptile house at a zoo mixed with rotting fish and something else, something ancient and alien, and the water felt colder near it. Multiple men reported that later, independently. The water temperature dropped noticeably when the creature approached. "It's a bloody sea serpent!" Able Seaman Williams was close to panic. "We're going to die. We're all going to die." Petty Officer Jackson, senior surviving non-commissioned officer, tried to maintain order. "Everyone stay calm. It hasn't attacked. Keep the rafts together." Fenton fumbled with his camera, trying to photograph it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. But the camera was waterlogged, dead. He gave up, just staring, tears streaming down his face, mixing with salt spray. "Oh God, oh Jesus Christ, oh God." Trotter stared, his mind struggling with cognitive dissonance. This cannot exist. This is not real, but I'm seeing it. We're all seeing it. HMS Coventry capsized completely, rolling through 90 degrees, then 120. The hull was now upside down, showing its full length, the propellers still slowly windmilling, steam vented from dozens of breaches. The ship's death was imminent. The creature submerged again as HMS Coventry made her final plunge, with a sound like a moan, metal, and escaping air and death. The 4,820-ton warship slid beneath the South Atlantic. The water rushed in, claiming her. Bubbles and debris boiled to the surface. Oil slicks spread, creating rainbow patterns on the gray water. Then silence. 19 men dead or missing. 234 survivors bobbing in life rafts in the freezing ocean, going into shock, hypothermia setting in with methodical cruelty. And the creature was still there, beneath them, somewhere in the depths. Several survivors later reported equipment anomalies that made no sense. Emergency locator beacons flickering or failing completely. Waterproof watches stopped at different times. Compasses in survival kits spinning wildly. Radio equipment suffering unprecedented static. Seaman Mitchell stared at his watch in disbelief. It just stopped. Dead. And it's supposed to be shockproof, waterproof, everything proof. The waiting began. HMS Broadsword and HMS Cardiff were racing to the scene at maximum speed. Helicopters were en route from HMS Hermes, but it would take time. The survivors huddled together for warmth, watching the water with new eyes, seeing threat in every wave, every shadow. The creature surfaced twice more during this period, each time briefly, 3 to 5 seconds, at varying distances. The third sighting, 150 yards away. Only the head and neck visible this time, rising 10 to 15 feet out of the water. The head shape was somewhat crocodilian, but with a longer snout. Visible teeth even at that distance, conical, yellowed, 8 to 12 inches long. The creature oriented toward the helicopters when it heard them approaching, then submerged smoothly. The fourth sighting, 80 yards away. Just a brief glimpse of the back and what appeared to be a fin or spine structure mid-body, creating a wake as it moved parallel to the rafts before diving deep. Each appearance reinforced the reality. This wasn't stress, wasn't hallucination, wasn't misidentification. Every man in those rafts knew, with absolute certainty, that something impossible was swimming beneath them. At 1:35 p.m., salvation arrived. The distinctive sound of Sea King helicopter rotors echoed across the water. For the survivors, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. 3 Sea Kings from HMS Hermes arrived simultaneously, accompanied by a Wessex from HMS Cardiff. The helicopters hovered at 50 feet, downdraft creating circular waves, making the life rafts rock violently. Winch operators prepared rescue harnesses, ready to extract the survivors from the freezing water. And then, the creature made its closest approach. perhaps disturbed by the helicopter noise and rotor wash, perhaps curious, perhaps territorial, perhaps something else entirely, some motivation beyond human comprehension. It surfaced 40 yards from the nearest life raft, Trotter's Raft. This time, it wasn't a brief glimpse. This time, there was no possibility of misidentification, no room for rationalization, no escape into comfortable denial. The creature rose from the depths deliberately, head emerging first. The neck extended upward to approximately 12 to 15 feet above the waterline. The head swiveled, appearing to examine the helicopters first, then the life rafts. The movement was controlled, powerful. This was not a panicked animal. This was a predator, or something that transcended such simple categorization, investigating something novel in its domain. Total visible length, 65 to 70 feet. Multiple crew members, trained in distance estimation, accounting for perspective, independently arrived at similar figures. The body diameter at the widest point, the torso or neck area, was 4 to 5 feet. Massive, powerful. The head was 6 feet long, 3 feet wide. The shape was elongated, somewhat crocodilian, but with distinct differences. The snout tapered but remained powerfully built. The jaw showed a massive underbite, revealing those terrible teeth. 8 to 12 inches of conical yellow-white ivory designed for grasping and tearing. The eyes. God, the eyes. 2 large orbs positioned laterally, but with forward-facing capability. Yellow-green iris. Vertical slit pupils approximately 10 to 12 inches in diameter. And behind those eyes, intelligence. Awareness. The unmistakable sense of being observed by something that understood it was observing. The nostrils, 2 of them positioned atop the snout, actively vented vapor with each breath. The skin texture on the head was rough, scaled, with a prominent ridge running from eyes to neck. The neck was 20 to 25 feet long, thick, 3 to 4 feet in diameter, with serpentine flexibility, covered in overlapping scales, each the size of a dinner plate. The color remained that dark olive green dorsally, fading to lighter gray-green on the sides. Visible musculature rippled beneath the skin with each movement. 2 prominent ridges ran parallel down the dorsal side. The body behind the neck was 35 to 40 feet of visible length. Serpentine, but robust. Not thin like an eel. Multiple points of articulation allowed for that characteristic undulating movement. Mid-body featured what appeared to be lateral fins or appendage structures, vestigial limbs, functional paddles, impossible to determine with certainty. Dorsal spines or ridges along the entire visible length rose approximately 12 to 18 inches tall. The tail remained submerged, hidden in the depths. The creature's behavior during this surface event was deliberate and unsettling in its purposefulness. It rose vertically from the depths. The neck extended upward, the head swiveled to examine first the helicopters, then the life rafts. It oriented directly toward Trotter's Raft, which contained 8 survivors. Over the course of 10 seconds, it closed the distance from 40 yards to 25 yards. There was no aggressive display, no mouth opening to reveal the full extent of those jaws, no vocalizations beyond that low-frequency rumble, no rapid approach that might signal attack. But the intent was unmistakable. It was investigating them. The sensory assault was overwhelming. The sound, that low-frequency rumble around 30 to 40 hertz, was felt as vibration in chest cavities. The raft's inflatable tubes resonated with it, creating an otherworldly humming. The smell became overwhelming as the distance closed. Musky, reptilian, mixed with salt water and something else. Something organic and ancient, like opening a tomb sealed for millennia. The air temperature around the creature was noticeably cooler. Breath was visible as vapor, despite 42-degree air temperature. Water streamed off the scales, catching sunlight, creating a prismatic effect that was almost beautiful, despite the primordial terror it invoked. The displacement generated by its surfacing created waves that rocked all nearby rafts violently. Men grabbed for handholds, terrified of being thrown into the water. Into that water, where this thing swam. Trotter was paralyzed. Every survival instinct screamed at him to move, to run, to do something, anything. But his body wouldn't respond. His hand gripped the raft's grab line until his knuckles were white, bloodless. He could see the creature's eye, the massive yellow eye, and it was looking directly at him. He felt seen, acknowledged, examined. There was intelligence there. It knew he was there. Fenton fumbled with his waterlogged camera one last time before giving up. He just stared, tears streaming down his face. "Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ! Oh God!" The words repeated like a mantra, like a prayer to a deity that seemed suddenly very distant. Able Seaman Williams began praying aloud. The Lord's Prayer, voice shaking. "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Petty Officer Jackson, who should have been giving orders, saying something, taking command, found that words wouldn't come. His rational mind, the mind that had served him through 8 years in the Navy, through combat in Northern Ireland, through 3 weeks of war, was breaking, shattering against the reality of what he was witnessing. Seaman Mitchell vomited over the side of the raft, pure primal fear overriding all other biological imperatives. In the helicopters above, trained pilots and observers struggled with their own cognitive dissonance. Sea King 1 pilot, Lieutenant Commander Barnes, broke radio protocol. "What the hell am I looking at?" Confirm visual, large marine animal, unknown species, vicinity of survivors. The Sea King, 2 observer had his camera running. "I've got it on camera. I'm filming." "Command, are you seeing this transmission?" The Wessex pilot's voice cracked slightly. "That's not a whale. That's not anything I've ever seen. How big is that thing?" The helicopters maintained altitude, rotors still thundering, but the crews were transfixed. Training told them to continue the rescue operation. Instinct told them to flee. They held position. The creature's head lowered. Those enormous eyes came level with the raft. Distance, 20 yards. Close enough that Trotter could see individual scales, their texture like ancient armor, scarring on the snout, old injuries, healed over years or decades or centuries, barnacles or similar organisms attached to the neck ridges, hitchhikers on something vast. The moisture on the nostrils, each breath causing slight expansion, the slow, deliberate breathing pattern, the pupil of the eye contracting slightly as it focused, time dilated, seconds stretched like taffy. The universe contracted to this moment, man and creature, separated by 20 yards of water and millions of years of evolution, regarding each other across a gulf that shouldn't exist. The creature's head tilted slightly, the way an intelligent animal examines something novel, a crow looking at a puzzle, a dolphin investigating a boat, a consciousness recognizing another consciousness and finding it interesting. The low-frequency sound increased in volume, rattling teeth, vibrating through water and air and bone. Was it communication? Sonar? Warning? Greeting? Impossible to know. The creature existed outside human frames of reference. Then, abruptly, without warning, the creature sank. Not a dive, not a crash beneath the waves, simply lowered smoothly back into the sea from which it had emerged. The head submerged, the neck followed, scales disappearing inch by inch. The ridged back sank from view, water flowing over ancient armor. And then nothing. The surface churned for a moment as something massive moved in the depths. Then even that disturbance settled. Gone. As if it had never been. The entire encounter lasted less than 20 seconds, but it fundamentally altered the reality of every person who witnessed it. Trotter gasped, realizing he'd been holding his breath. He drew in great shuddering lungfuls of air. His hands shook uncontrollably. Did that just happen? Please tell me that just happened. Fenton's voice was hoarse. We all saw it. Everyone saw it. The helicopters saw it. Jackson found his voice, rough with shock. Nobody says a fucking word about this until we're debriefed. Not a word. That's an order. Sea King 1 pilot, breaking radio silence again. Survivors have been exposed to... We have unusual circumstances here. Request immediate extraction, all survivors. Priority 1. The winch operations proceeded with urgent efficiency. The helicopter crews worked fast, pulling survivors from rafts and water, wrapping them in thermal blankets, getting them into the cabins. Get them out of the water, away from whatever was down there. Trotter was third from his raft to be extracted. As the winch line lifted him, spinning slowly, he looked down at the dark water below. For a moment, just a moment, he saw a shadow, large, deep, moving beneath the surface. Then it was gone. Or had it ever been there? All 234 survivors were recovered within 20 minutes. 19 men remained aboard HMS Coventry, entombed in her hull as she settled on the ocean floor 300 feet down. Their sacrifice would be remembered, their deaths mourned. But for the survivors, another reality had intruded upon their grief. As Trotter's helicopter banked away from the site, he looked back one final time. The water where HMS Coventry had sank was calm now. Just an oil slick and floating debris marking where a warship once floated. No sign of the creature, but he knew it was there. They all knew. The knowledge sat in their chests like a stone, cold and heavy and undeniable. The helicopters ferried survivors to HMS Hermes, HMS Broadsword, and HMS Cardiff. As the Sea King carrying Trotter touched down on the carrier's flight deck, medical personnel rushed forward. Standard procedure: treat for hypothermia, shock, injuries, get them warm, get them stable, process the trauma. But how do you process the impossible? In the sickbay aboard HMS Hermes, wrapped in blankets, hot tea burning his throat, Trotter sat with Fenton and 5 other men from their raft. They didn't speak. What was there to say? They'd all seen it. Language seemed inadequate. Captain Hart Dyke, despite his head wound requiring 12 stitches, despite burns on his arms, despite shock, insisted on accounting for every survivor personally before accepting treatment. He moved through the sick bay, speaking to each man, making sure they were alive, present, accounted for. 19 dead, 234 saved, the arithmetic of combat. But when Hartdyke reached Trotter's group, he paused. His eyes met Trotter's. A moment of understanding passed between them. You saw it too. The captain gave a slight nod, said nothing, and moved on. As evening fell over the South Atlantic, survivors began to speak quietly about what they'd witnessed. In crew quarters, in mess halls, in quiet corners, the conversations began. Your camera? Trotter asked Fenton. Waterlogged, ruined, nothing saved. Williams, sitting across from them, spoke softly. Maybe that's for the best. Mitchell shook his head. We all saw it, 30 of us at least. They can't say we're all crazy. Jackson's voice was flat. They can say whatever they want. We know what we saw. At 1800 hours, survivors were called in groups to provide statements. Intelligence officers from fleet headquarters conducted the interviews. Standard procedure after combat loss. The questions started routine. Time of first radar contact, number of aircraft, evasive actions taken, damage assessment, casualty reports. Then Commander Whitmore, an intelligence officer with 20 years service and a reputation for being utterly no-nonsense, asked the question that changed everything. Several survivors have mentioned an unusual marine animal sighting. Did you witness anything unusual in the water? The room went quiet. 7 men, called in for group debriefing, exchanged glances. The moment of decision. Tell the truth and risk being labeled crazy, or remain silent. Jackson spoke first. Yes, sir. We saw something. Whitmore's demeanor shifted. He became more focused, leaning forward, pen poised over notepad. Describe what you saw. The details poured out. Multiple witnesses corroborating. Size estimates. Duration of sightings. Physical description. Behavior. Whitmore took notes, expression unreadable, asking clarifying questions. When it was Trotter's turn for individual interview, he found himself in a small compartment with Whitmore and another officer he didn't recognize. Describe what you saw, leading seaman. It looked like a sea serpent, sir. Large, 60-70 feet minimum, reptilian, scaled, dark green and gray. Could it have been a whale? No, sir. Absolutely not. Wrong shape, wrong movement, wrong behavior. I've seen whales. This wasn't a whale. Could you have been mistaken due to stress, hypothermia? Sir, I saw it clearly, multiple times, at ranges from 40 yards to 200 yards. Duration of longest sighting approximately 15 to 20 seconds. So did 24 other men. The helicopter crews saw it. It was real. Did it display any aggressive behavior? No, sir. It seemed curious, investigating, but not aggressive. Whitmore made notes. His expression gave nothing away. Thank you, leading seaman. That will be all for now. You're to remain aboard Hermes until further notice. Do not discuss this with anyone outside your immediate group of witnesses. Over the next 24 hours, all witnesses were interviewed separately. Those with extended observation periods or close encounters were interviewed multiple times by different officers. The process was thorough, professional, and increasingly unsettling in its implications. Fenton's interview focused heavily on his camera. You attempted to photograph the creature? Yes, sir, but the camera was waterlogged, didn't work. Did you get any images before it failed? I don't know, sir. The camera wouldn't advance film after the first explosion. We'll need to examine the camera. Of course, sir. The camera was confiscated. Fenton never saw it again. When he asked about it weeks later, he was told it had been lost in transit during repatriation. May 26th through 27th, survivors began to notice patterns. They were being kept somewhat isolated, not in any obvious way. They weren't locked up, weren't under guard, but they were together, in specific quarters, not integrating with regular crew. They ate together, birthed together, remained together. We're being quarantined, Jackson observed. Not medically, informationally. Word spread quietly among the survivors. Stick to the story. Tell the truth. We know what we saw. We're not crazy. On May 28th, Rear Admiral Woodward, commander of the entire task force, personally interviewed Captain Hartdyke and senior survivors. Woodward was known throughout the Royal Navy as brilliant, pragmatic, and absolutely no nonsense. Captain, you're telling me that you and approximately 30 of your crew observed a large, unknown marine animal in the vicinity of your sinking ship? Yes, sir. That's correct. And this animal was approximately 60 to 80 feet in length, serpentine, with visible head and neck structure? Yes, sir. Captain, you understand how this sounds? I do, sir. But I also know what I saw, what we all saw. Multiple independent observations over 30 minutes, clear visibility, trained observers. Woodward studied Hartdyke for a long moment. You're a credible officer, Captain. Your record is impeccable. If you were alone in this claim, I'd suggest hypothermia-induced hallucination. But 30 men, helicopter crews, multiple ships' personnel? He paused. This is problematic. Sir, it was real. I believe you believe that, Captain. On May 29th, all witnesses were called to individual meetings with administrative officers. They were presented with documents, official forms, legal language dense enough to be almost incomprehensible. The documents were labeled Official Secrets Act, Supplemental Security Agreement. Trotter read through the key passages with growing unease. All aspects of the HMS Coventry sinking regarding unidentified marine phenomena are classified secret. Discussion of such phenomena with unauthorized personnel, including family members, constitutes a violation of the Official Secrets Act and may result in prosecution under military law. Violations may result in imprisonment for up to 14 years, forfeiture of military pension rights, and permanent criminal record. Personnel are reminded that national security during wartime requires absolute discretion regarding all classified matters. Sir, why are we being asked to sign this? Trotter asked the administrative officer. We were attacked by Argentine aircraft. That's not secret. It's in all the papers. The officer's expression was impassive. Sign the document, leading seaman. That's an order. And if I refuse, sir, you won't refuse. This is the Royal Navy, not a debating society. You will sign, or you will face court-martial for refusing a direct order in wartime. Do I make myself clear? Every witness signed. They had no choice. The military didn't offer choices. But even as Trotter signed, his mind rebelled. This was wrong. They'd seen something real, something important. And now they were being told to forget it, bury it, pretend it never happened. The suppression was systematic and thorough. Fenton's camera disappeared. Helicopter footage vanished. The Sea King observer, Petty Officer Duncan, who'd filmed the creature's surfacing, found that the videotape had been removed from the helicopter's recording system. When he asked about it, he was told the footage showed inconclusive imagery of marine mammals, possibly large seal or whale, identified as non-noteworthy. Duncan later stated privately to close friends, "That's bullshit. I know what I filmed. That was no seal. HMS Broadsword's deck log should have contained observer reports of the incident. When portions were declassified years later, those specific pages were missing, simply gone. After-action reports existed, detailed accounts of the sinking. But the unclassified versions made no mention of unusual marine life. If classified annexes existed, and surely they must, they remained sealed. Through June and July, as the war wound down toward British victory, HMS Coventry survivors were gradually dispersed. Different ships, different bases, different commands. The group was broken up systematically, ensuring they couldn't continue discussing the incident collectively. The psychological impact manifested in different ways. Nightmares were common. Trotter woke repeatedly, gasping, seeing that yellow eye in the darkness, feeling the low-frequency rumble in his chest. Williams developed a profound reluctance to go to sea, eventually requesting transfer to shore duty. Mitchell's drinking increased. Fenton became obsessed with cryptozoology, spending hours in libraries researching sea serpent sightings. Several marriages strained under the weight of secrets that couldn't be shared. How do you explain to your wife why you wake up screaming? How do you tell her what you saw when you signed papers threatening you with prison if you speak? Trotter left the Navy in 1985. He returned to Plymouth, married his fiancée Sarah as planned. He found work in maritime security, still connected to the sea but never returning to it. Sarah knew something had happened beyond the sinking, beyond the combat trauma that other Falklands veterans exhibited. But he wouldn't discuss it. "I can't," he told her when she pressed. "I signed papers. Official Secrets Act. I could go to prison." "For what? For being in a battle? Please don't ask me again." Captain Hartdyke retired from the Royal Navy in 1984. He became a church rector, finding in faith what military service could no longer provide. In 1993, he published a book about his experiences, 4 Weeks in May. The book described the sinking in vivid, painful detail, but it made no mention of the creature, not a single word. When interviewed by a journalist years later about whether he'd left anything out of the book, Hartdyke's response was carefully measured. "There are certain aspects of the incident that remain classified. I am bound by oaths I took. I cannot discuss those aspects. Can you confirm such aspects exist? I can confirm that I cannot discuss them." As the years passed, the psychological weight of enforced silence began to crack. Some survivors started speaking, carefully, anonymously, testing the waters. In 1995, a late-night UK radio program called Strange Seas featured an anonymous interview with a man identifying himself only as a former Royal Navy sailor who served in the Falklands. The caller described witnessing an unidentified large marine animal during combat operations. No names, no ship identified, but the details were specific enough that other Coventry survivors recognized the account immediately. In 2001, a cryptozoology website received a detailed post from a user calling himself Falklands Vet 82. The account matched the Coventry incident in every detail. The post included observations that only someone who'd been there could know: the specific angle of HMS Coventry's list, the number of life rafts deployed, the helicopter types involved, the water temperature, the time elapsed between sightings. In 2008, Petty Officer Jackson, now 64 and retired from the Navy, gave an interview to a documentary filmmaker. His face was obscured, voice altered, but his statement was clear and detailed. He described the creature, the multiple sightings, the official suppression that followed. His voice still carried the awe and terror from 26 years earlier. It was real, as real as I'm sitting here talking to you. We all saw it, trained observers, clear conditions, multiple sightings, and they made us sign papers, threatened us with prison if we talked. Why? Why threaten us if we were just seeing things? Why take cameras, confiscate footage, disappear evidence? You don't do that for mass hallucination. Other corroborating accounts emerged gradually. In 2003, a crew member from HMS Broadsword, speaking anonymously, confirmed that lookouts aboard his ship had observed something unusual in the water during rescue operations. The official log had been sanitized before archiving. In 2010, a retired Argentine Air Force pilot, Colonel Ramirez, gave an interview about his Falklands service. Unprompted, discussing his attack run on May 25th, he mentioned something strange. After we released our bombs and turned away during the low-level escape, I saw something in the water near the burning ship. Something very large, not a whale. I've seen whales. This was different. I only saw it for a few seconds, but it troubled me. I never reported it. Who would believe me? In 2015, the helicopter pilot from that day, Lieutenant Commander Barnes, now retired, published a memoir of his naval career. In a chapter about the Falklands, he acknowledged obliquely that certain aspects of the Coventry rescue operations involved observations that remain classified, and that he was not at liberty to discuss those observations in detail. The pattern was clear. Multiple witnesses, across multiple platforms, over decades, maintaining consistency in their accounts, despite having no contact with each other. That consistency is either evidence of truth or evidence of coordinated conspiracy. And conspiracy among 30-plus military personnel separated across the world, maintaining absolute consistency for 40-plus years, strains credibility far more than the possibility they witnessed something real. The historical context added weight to their accounts. The South Atlantic Ocean has a long history of unexplained sightings. In 1848, HMS Daedalus encountered something her crew described as a sea serpent 60 feet long. The captain's official report to the Admiralty was detailed and matter-of-fact. Trained observers, clear conditions, multiple witnesses. In 1906, the crew of SS Tresco reported a 60-foot serpentine creature. In 1925, a Chilean Navy destroyer reported unidentified large marine life. In 1966, an Argentine fishing vessel photographed an unknown animal. The photographs were sent to authorities and promptly lost. The indigenous peoples of the region, the Yagan of Tierra del Fuego, the Tehuelche of Patagonia, had legends spanning centuries about massive creatures in the deep waters. Hawoosh, the Yagan called it, great serpent of the deep, neither harmful nor helpful, ancient as the sea itself. From a scientific perspective, the possibility couldn't be dismissed outright. The deep ocean remains largely unexplored. Vast regions of the South Atlantic exceed 10,000 feet depth and have barely been mapped. New species are discovered regularly. Large, elusive species, giant squid, megamouth shark, were considered mythological until physical evidence proved their existence. The Falklands region specifically offered conditions that could theoretically support unknown large species. Deep ocean trenches, rich marine ecosystem with abundant prey, minimal human presence historically. If something wanted to remain hidden, this was exactly the kind of environment that would permit it. In 2012, a Freedom of Information Act request was submitted to the UK Ministry of Defence, asking for any documents related to unusual marine life observations during the HMS Coventry sinking incident. The response was carefully worded. No records exist of unusual marine life observations during HMS Coventry sinking incident. The ship was lost to enemy air attack on May 25, 1982, with 19 fatalities. All relevant documents have been declassified according to standard procedures. The phrasing was important. They didn't deny the classification existed. They claim no records exist, a subtle but crucial distinction. Records can be destroyed, classifications can be removed, and the documents themselves eliminated. Saying no records exist is very different from saying no such observations occurred. As of 2024, many of the original witnesses have passed away. Captain Hartdyke died in 2022, taking whatever else he knew to the grave. Petty Officer Jackson died in 2019, but he left a sealed letter with his solicitor with instructions to be opened in 2032. What that letter contains remains unknown. David Trotter is still alive at 72. He lives quietly in Plymouth. He rarely speaks about the Falklands. Close friends say he still has nightmares, still wakes up seeing that eye. When pressed about rumors of something else happening during the sinking, his response is always the same. I signed papers. Official Secrets Act. I can't discuss it. James Fenton lives in Scotland, ran a photography shop until retirement. He occasionally speaks at cryptozoology conferences, always under a pseudonym, always careful not to violate his secrecy agreement too explicitly. But his accounts are detailed enough, specific enough, that listeners understand he's not speculating. Several other witnesses remain alive, scattered across the UK and beyond. Some speak anonymously, others maintain complete silence. The threat of prosecution even 40 years later remains real in their minds. The question remains unanswered. What was it? The possibilities are limited and all unsatisfying to conventional thinking. Either 30-plus trained military observers, including pilots, ship captains, radar operators, across multiple platforms, over 30 minutes of observation time, all hallucinated or misidentified known animals. Or the ocean contains large species unknown to science. Or something else. Some third explanation we don't yet have the framework to understand. The professional credentials of the witnesses argue against hallucination. These were not civilians prone to panic or fantasy. They were Royal Navy personnel, extensively trained in observation and identification. They were at war, yes, but the creature sightings occurred after the combat phase, when immediate danger had passed. They were in shock from the sinking, yes, but multiple independent observations over extended time argue against trauma-induced hallucination. The consistency of accounts across decades argues against fabrication. People who fabricate stories tend to embellish over time, add details, contradict themselves. The Coventry witnesses have maintained remarkable consistency. The creature's description from 1982 interviews matches descriptions from accounts decades later. The official response argues most compellingly for the reality of the sightings. Governments don't threaten military personnel with prosecution and imprisonment over hallucinations. They don't confiscate cameras, destroy footage, and disappear evidence if there's nothing there. The very act of suppression validates the significance of what was witnessed. If the survivors had seen nothing unusual, there would have been no need for Official Secrets Act agreements. The sinking itself wasn't classified. It was reported in newspapers worldwide. The Argentine attack was public knowledge, but something else about that day required absolute secrecy enforced by threat of imprisonment. What could justify that level of suppression? National security during wartime is the official explanation. But security against what? Argentina knowing there are large, unknown marine animals in the South Atlantic? How does that affect military operations? The more logical explanation is that authorities didn't want public knowledge of the sightings because they couldn't explain them, couldn't control the narrative, couldn't fit the observations into accepted scientific frameworks. And during wartime, when national morale and international credibility matter intensely, the last thing a government wants is its military personnel claiming to have seen sea monsters. Better to suppress it, classify it, threaten anyone who speaks, wait for time and death to bury the story. But the story persists. It persists because it's true, because 30-plus people saw something that day, something real, something that challenged every assumption about what lives in the ocean. The deep sea keeps its secrets well. The Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth, has been visited by humans only 3 times. We've mapped more of the moon's surface than the ocean floor. Vast regions remain completely unexplored, unknown, mysterious. Is it really so impossible that in those depths, in regions humans rarely visit, in the cold, dark pressure of the abyss, something survives? Some species that evolved millions of years ago and persists in populations too small or too dispersed for us to have documented? The HMS Coventry survivors know the answer. They know because they saw it. They looked into that massive yellow eye and understood in that moment that humanity's understanding of the world is incomplete. They carry that knowledge like a weight. Some have found ways to speak about it, carefully, anonymously, testing the boundaries of their secrecy agreements. Others have remained silent, taking their observations to the grave, bound by oaths and threats and the knowledge that speaking means risking everything. The creature, If it was just one individual, and that raises questions about breeding populations, remains unverified by science. No specimens, no clear photographs, no physical evidence beyond the testimony of witnesses who risk prosecution by speaking. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially in the ocean, especially in the deep, dark regions where pressure crushes and light fails, and human observation rarely reaches. On May 25, 1982, HMS Coventry was attacked by Argentine aircraft and sunk with the loss of 19 brave men. That is historical fact, documented, verified, commemorated. On that same day, according to multiple credible witnesses, something else happened, something that remains classified, suppressed, denied, something that challenges our understanding of what lives in the ocean. The witnesses saw it. They know what they saw. No amount of official denial, no threat of prosecution, no passage of time changes that fundamental truth. And somewhere in the South Atlantic, in waters 300 feet deep, or 3,000 or 30,000, in the cold darkness where pressure exceeds human tolerance and light becomes memory, something swims. Something with scales like armor and eyes like ancient gold. Something that existed before humans walked upright, before we built ships and sailed oceans, and convinced ourselves we understood the world. It's still there, in the deep places, in the mystery that covers 70% of our planet. The witnesses know, and they can never forget. To the 19 men lost aboard HMS Coventry, their sacrifice is remembered, their service honored, their names preserved. To the survivors who witnessed the impossible, your courage in speaking, despite the consequences, despite the threats, despite everything, has not been for nothing. Truth has a weight that time cannot diminish. The ocean keeps its secrets, but not forever. Nothing stays hidden forever. Some truths are simply waiting to surface.